Elon Musk, the man, the legend, the entrepreneur with the mission of improving the environment and getting a colony on Mars. How do you think he would raise calves if he was a farmer? I think I know. Welcome to another video of a farmer who loves his animals. Alright, I admit it, I definitely am using Elon Musk in the title as a bit of clickbait, but what I'm referring to is not necessarily that I believe Elon Musk will ever actually become a farmer, even though his brother does dress like a cowboy and is interested in growing vegetables and stuff in greenhouses. But what I'm really talking about is the physics principle of reasoning by first principle. And then that, of course, is instead of reasoning by analogy. So reasoning by analogy is basically when you take a conclusion from one part of your life and you apply that conclusion to another part of your life, basically to save yourself the effort of coming to a conclusion every single time you have to make a simple decision. And you can take conclusions from your own life that you've made in the past, or you can take conclusions from other people or from other examples or what other people have done, and basically just accept it as a truth because it's simpler, it's easier that way. So in contrast, reasoning from first principles is when you look at the very basic level, the simplest way, or the simplest form. What do we know for sure? And then you reason up from those simplest truths to come up to a conclusion to help solve your problem or make a decision. And that obviously takes up a lot of effort, so it's not commonly done. But that is what reasoning by first principles is. And that's actually the very best way to come to an absolute truth. So when it comes to raising calves, on dairy farms especially, what's commonly done in the dairy industry is the calves are removed from their mothers as quick as possible, and that's done because it's been shown that calves are healthier when they're managed that way. If they're left with their mothers, usually they get pneumonia, they get scours, they get sick. Over time, we've found that the ideal housing situations for cows, adult cows, and then young calves are very different. And so when we remove them as quick as possible and put them in this ideal housing situation, then they thrive, they do better. And also, in and around where the cows have their calves, there's usually manure and feces and along with that, all sorts of fecal bacteria that can cause the scours and the pneumonia that I was referring to. So basically by removing them quickly, they have less exposure to those fecal bacteria and are usually healthier. So that's why it's always been done, and that's why in the industry, leaving calves with their mother is considered irresponsible, and basically it's not recommended. However, I've been experimenting with it. I always thought that it was impossible, but I'd give it a try because I don't really know for myself if that's true. So I did a couple of calves, left them with their mothers, and they actually did really well. So I'm convinced that that it is possible to leave calves with their mom. It's just that we haven't given the problem enough thought. So, to that degree, if we look at this problem by analogy, it's impossible to leave calves with their mother because it's been done, and it's been tried, and it's never been done successfully, especially at scale. So that's what the conclusion that basically everybody comes to, as even not only the farmers but also veterinarians and researchers in the industry, and that's why it's not done. But if you reason by first principles, there's something that is referred to as the 5 C's of calf care, and that's basically what I would believe at the basic level is the truth of what calves need to thrive. And those 5 C's are colostrum, cleanliness, calories, comfort, and consistency. If you have those 5 C's checked off, the calves should thrive. But nowhere in there does it say that you have to remove the cow and the calf from each other. There's nowhere that it says that you have to get the calf as soon as possible away from the mother and keep them in isolation, and that's the only way to do it. It doesn't say that within the 5 C's or basically the first principles of calf care. So if we could check off those 5 C's while keeping them with their mother, it should be possible in theory. So of the 5 C's, cleanliness is the one that poses the most difficulty when it comes to the idea of leaving cows and their calves together. It's very difficult to keep the calves from being exposed to too much fecal bacteria and viral diseases, and also the air quality quite often is lower, especially further north here where I am in Canada, where in the winter time you have to keep the curtains closed and have less ventilation, and with less ventilation you have lower air quality just to keep the barn warm and keep the barn from freezing. So that's the main challenge. That's the main reason why cows and calves are kept separate. And then as far as the other C's, there's the comfort is super important, especially in the winter where you need to have deep bedding and lots of fluffy straw just to keep the calves warm. They like to kind of nestle inside the straw just to trap their body heat. And then colostrum. Colostrum is absolutely critical, and what you need for the colostrum is the antibodies, especially, and the growth factors within the colostrum. So basically that is like around the first 3 days of milk after a cow has her calf, and especially the very first feeding is absolutely critical. That's where there's the most density of antibodies and growth factors in the colostrum. And also, especially in the first half an hour of birth, there's almost little gaps and spaces within the gut lining of the calf where large proteins can pass, and that's temporary. Over the course of the day, those gaps and spaces will close up and be like a normal gut lining. So in that window you can have antibodies or basically the immune system of the cow pass into the calf intact through the gaps in the gut lining. So that's why that first feeding is so critical, because that is basically the calf's only immunity for the first 3 months of its life. And after that, they start slowly transitioning to their own immunity. And not too surprisingly, calories are important. You need a calf grows super fast. They start this small and they gotta grow to be that big. So you need a lot of calories to make that happen. So calories are obviously important. And the last C is consistency. It's something that's less obvious as far as the differing factors between why calves do well or not do well. And it's been shown in several studies where if you give calves the same number of calories or the same liters of milk in their early life, and in one group you feed them the exact same times every single day, whereas the other group you feed them at somewhat random times throughout the day, but the calories are kept the same. The calves that are fed the exact same time in predictable ways grow faster. They become bigger, and it's just a very clear-cut way to show how important consistency is. And in my opinion, that has a lot to do with stress. Stress affects absolutely everything. Cortisol decreases your immune system. It increases the calories burnt. It has effects throughout your entire body, and that's I feel like that's where consistency is really showing, is basically the reason behind why consistency is so important. And actually I think leaving the calves with their mom would actually help with becoming more consistent, because you don't have to put that calf in a brand new environment. Basically the spot where the calf is born and with the animals that it's around when it's born stays the same even after birth. So I feel like you'd almost have an advantage as far as consistency in leaving calves with their mom. So I feel like they'd be less stressed for that reason. And obviously they'll also be less stressed because they still have a caring, loving mother to lick and clean and comfort them. So there'll be double reasons why they'd be less stressed with leaving the calves with their mother. So basically, in summary, with the 5 C's, As far as consistency, I think there's almost an advantage of leaving calves with their mother. Comfort, there's not much difference. Colostrum, there's no difference as long as you make sure you bottle feed the very first feeding. After that, you kind of let the calf find the cow's teat. So colostrum doesn't necessarily have to be any different. And I would imagine with calories, it'd be a real advantage too in keeping the calves with their mother, especially the way we're currently feeding our calves is with a bottle, and we bottle feed our calves twice a day. So then there's a limited number of liters of milk that they could drink in that way, whereas when you leave the calves with their mother, they can have lots of small feedings throughout the day. So in a 24-hour period, they would actually have a huge advantage in calories over basically when they're separated from their mother. And it's maybe not as much the case with, there's some people who have a robotic calf feeder. Basically it's a station where the calf can come up and drink also 24 hours of the day and just have little drinks throughout the day, and this robotic calf feeder will mix some milk replacer or feed some cooled milk from the cow herd and feed it throughout the day as well. So that's maybe not the case when you have a robotic calf feeder, but for most farmers, I feel like the calves being left with their mother would actually drink more milk and consume more calories than they would if they were fed in a pail or in a bottle. So the real problem to leaving calves with their mother is the cleanliness. So how did I make that work so far, and why do I believe that it's possible to scale that up? So to answer that question, there's two areas of cleanliness that are critical, and the one is the air quality, the cleanliness of the air that the calves breathe, and then the other part is the cleanliness of the bedding that the calves are laying on and basically walking through and getting all over themselves, including in their mouth, and causing scours. So to improve the air quality in a barn with cows and calves, it would have to be a barn designed to freeze. It would have to be have the quality of air that you would have in the summer when the curtains are wide open and the ventilation is coming through and there's plenty of air exchanges, and allow for that also to happen in winter. So if you have lots of air exchanges in the winter and there's lots of cold fresh air coming in, basically the interior of the barn would have to be really cold as well, basically the same temperature as outside. And you might think there'd be challenges that way because the calf would then might have to suffer from the cold, but the calf could snuggle in with the mother. They could nestle in the bedding. As long as there's not draft, it's nowhere near, it doesn't feel nearly as cold to the animals. I feel that's where I believe the calves would still be able to thrive, because our calves are outside in the calfage right now, and they're in a very cold environment. We have coats on them, so I'd probably try to put coats on them together with their mothers as well. But the coats help keep them warm, but they're out in the freezing cold and they actually do really, really well in that cold, as long as they're not in a drafty environment. So that the barn has to be designed well, it has to offer lots of air exchanges, lots of airflow, lots of great ventilation without there being lots of air movement within the barn, without there being drafts or pockets of air that drop down on the animals. So that's possible. There are barns, plenty of barns around where it's not insulated, it's not kept warm, and they allow the barn to freeze. So that's not a real challenge. It's been done and it's doable. The real challenge is the bedding, the manure that the calf gets exposed to. There's been a somewhat recent trend in pack pens. So this is what I'm in right now. We have our fresh cows here in a pack, and as opposed to free stalls where our milking herders, our milking cows are all in free stalls, in deep bedded free stalls. And whenever animals are typically kept in a pack, you put some bedding in there, and then the cows walk through there. They drop the manure and their urine in there, and it gets dirty. And then once it gets too dirty, you add more bedding. You kind of layer it all up, and you get this breeding ground from manure with lots of nitrogen, lots of moisture, lots of organic matter. You have an amazing breeding ground for anaerobic bacteria. Those are the bacteria that cause disease and sickness and scours in calves. So there's been a recent trend, a relatively recent trend, in farmers who have pack pens but then drive through there twice a day with a cultivator to introduce air into the pack. And by introducing air on twice a day on a regular basis, you get the aerobic bacteria mixed in with the manure and the moisture and the organic matter, and then you start to get compost. And that compost, it has a balance of bacteria, not just the disease-causing bacteria, but also healthy bacteria. And if you have a healthier balance of bacteria in this pack, farmers have been getting away with keeping their milking cows on there, and they don't get mastitis. So mastitis is obviously also caused by fecal bacteria infecting the udder of the cow. So I feel like it's a very similar problem. The composting has been a very good solution to having milking cows on packs without them getting mastitis. So I feel like the solution would also work for having less environmental bacteria, less fecal bacteria getting the calves sick for scours. So that is the hypothesis. That is my belief. That is the conclusion I'm coming to when I reason from first principles. So I just wanted to clarify my opinion on the common practice in the dairy industry of removing calves with their mother. It's done for a reason. It's always been done that way, and that's because calves thrive. They do much better. They're healthier. It's more ethical to remove the calves from their mother and to raise them separately, just because you have less sick calves, you have less dead calves. It's in their best interest to remove them as soon as possible. However, when you have to take a calf, a baby calf, and you pull it away from its mother, its loving, caring, upset mother in some cases, not all cases of course, sometimes they really don't even notice. In a perfect world, if you keep the calves healthy and you're able to keep them together, it's way more ethical to do it that way. So that's why I'm doing these experiments, just to see if I can find a way to make it possible to, at scale, keep calves together with their mother and have the best of both worlds: healthy calves, thriving calves, and basically have that connection of mother and baby together. So I hope I was able to clearly explain why I think it is possible to leave the calves with their mother. The 5 C's, they apply to calves being together with their mother as well as separating. It doesn't say anywhere in the 5 C's of calf care that they have to be removed. It's just the cleanliness is a real challenge. So that's basically what I'm doing to try to improve animal welfare. One of the many things I'm trying to do to improve animal welfare. And yeah, if you like what I'm doing, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hey, sweetheart.